So hello everybody, my name is Radu and I'm going to present the SuperTracker project which I did in HTML5. Why is this such a great app? It's because it has this Superman logo there and other apps don't have it, so if you want to be super you should use my app instead of the other ones. It has several features. First of all, this marker is going to rotate according to how he moves around on the map, on the direction that he is going on. It is possible now to log in with the Mopsy user, and that means that the trajectories that you record can be sent to Mopsy database and no longer stored on the phone. It is also possible to view the most recent collection. In this app, I showed the most recent 5 routes. The movement type is also available here. And the last I can't demonstrate because I didn't have time, but when you view the collection, Superman quickly flies over the route at the beginning and there is a whoosh noise, which I recorded myself. So it's kind of like a eye candy feature there. But anyway, I want to end with what I found most interesting and what I learned during when I made the project, and that's that the Google Maps API is not the same in the browser and in the native variant. So they have different method names, different parameter names, and it's somehow complicated, and I don't understand why they release all the time new versions, but they don't want to synchronize these aspects. Also, some of the things have missing features, like the web version doesn't allow to rotate this marker image, and I had to do that kind of not so nice solution with 8 different rotated icons that I switch. That's it. I don't know if it was 4 minutes, but it should be about 4 minutes. Yeah, so that's all I will ask, and if you feel like anything else you want to point out about your app, you can. If you want to say, maybe, I have heard that there are some conflicts, like there are some teams in which one person works more than another person, and if you feel like that I need to know that, then let me know, but otherwise the grade will be the same for everybody in the team. Okay, now let's see the real application, which you will not have a chance to demonstrate, unfortunately, but I will test all of them beforehand. Yeah, okay, so the app is pretty much the same that you have seen last time, but now there is this login there, which I decided to make because there is not really a good idea to store so many points on your phone, and the cookies solution wasn't working before. It was, if the route would be too big, then it would give some error and it would not store it in memory when you collect. So I integrated it with the Mopsy login system and the Mopsy database to send the trajectory there. Now I log in with my account. And you will notice the first thing that happens after I press the login button is this loading text is there. So it doesn't look that fantastic, but it is there and it's telling me that something is happening and I have to wait. So this is something that it is important. It's very important to let the user know that something is happening and the app is not just hanged or crashed in a way. It doesn't matter how you show it, but you should. And I briefly managed to look over Teemu's app from Joensuu. Yes, so Teemu. This is something that you should also add to it, progress indicator. So when I pressed this login button here, after I try to log in, it says that loading text on the top. So just the same in your situation when you change the city in the app, make sure that while it's querying the weather information, it displays something to the user so he knows that something is happening. But I will give more comments to you today. Okay, I log in again with my other user. This is really one of the biggest problems in most, I would say, novice app developers, because sometimes it takes very long time, or the connection is poor, or whatever, and this loading could stay on the screen maybe half a minute. And what do you do then? If you don't display anything, user thinks it doesn't work. Yeah, okay. So after the logging in, you should be very familiar to this page already. I still use cookies, but I don't use them to record trajectories. I use them to save my user name. So after I refreshed the page now, I don't have to log in anymore. It keeps my information from the last successful login. So that's what is changed from this situation. And on the main screen, I have worked a little bit on the size and positioning of the buttons. It's not really perfect, but now it looks usable in both orientations. So even if the screen is in landscape mode, the buttons are not totally covering everything there. So this was one problem last time, and I made them a bit more round because you mentioned that they were not beautiful.
Okay.
So now they are more beautiful, but
That's true.
but not by much. And then the collection page. Okay, so there is some whoosh noise, but probably you can't hear it well because it's only on my computer. But anyway, you have the very fast, kind of fidgety Superman going around the track. I think it's a funny feature to have there, but it would need to be worked on a little bit because, well, I don't like this, the way that he quickly changes rotation too much. So when he's somehow changing too much, the rotation it's not pleasing. And I think what would be needed is in this system is to make even more of those rotated variants. So now I have 8, maybe I can make 16, and then the rotation is a bit smoother. I don't know any other way to make it better.
Why is this nice sound so in the time?
Because I was ill and I couldn't make for a longer time.
Okay. What about if it's going to be in the blue chord sound?
Then it's like,
Okay. No.
but it could be made. I think so. So there are tricks that you can use. So of course the sound is a little bit different. Maybe it starts with a higher pitch and it looks like that. You could cut it into 3 different sounds and then loop only the middle part programmatically. So you start playing this sound, and when this sound ends, you move to this sound, and then this sound will loop until your Superman reaches the end, and then at the final stage it fades away. So everything could be fine-tuned, and this is definitely not fantastic, but it works. Anyway, so going, and yeah, I integrated also the movement type here, so it tells me the most dominant movement type. On that place, but for some reason all of my recent trajectories are walking, so it's not very funny. But there are icons for cycling and the rest. I might do something to show them to you later. And now going back, I don't think I modified much here. Oh yes, I did something. I don't have this. Oh, just a second. Maybe like that. I was using this incognito mode so that cache and cookies were cleared completely at the beginning, but there I don't have this tool for changing the location, so I can demonstrate. Yes, so where are we now? Somewhere on Ilomantsi Road. So when starting, the only difference I would say is that I display these statistics. So these statistics are really just calculated, just total statistics. So whatever it was recorded in total, which means that that if I stop now and then time passes by, then this speed will decrease because it's the total, it's the average speed of the whole trajectory. So now this stopping moment is basically having an impact on that, but not on the distance. And yeah, otherwise it's kind of the same as before. After stopping, I have the same option to save and to delete. Delete will not keep the record, and there is also this button now here which does this segmentation. So it finds that this is 2 driving segments because I had that one stop while talking to you in the middle. So this is the same function that was existing before, but I fine-tuned it a little bit, and the interface additions these icons there, and the route is colored with different colors for car, walking, running, and so on. Now I'm not going to save it because it will go to my, or actually, yeah, I will save it because I have to demonstrate. So saving, it gets uploaded to Mopsy, and it mentions here that it may take a few minutes to appear in your collection. Now this is not a great way to mention something like this. You should really build your own customized notification box there. looks much more nice than CSUEF.v says something. On the phone it looks better because the text is bigger and easier to see, but anyway, so it does take a while for it to appear in the collection because Mopsy is doing some processing on the root. So if you remember from yesterday that talk about cropping only the roots in the screen and this polygonal approximation, and also this segmentation for finding the move type, preparing this cell representation for the similarity search, all of these are being done now. So it takes a little time for it to appear in the collection, but I think that it should be there by now, so it doesn't take that long time. So it's now there. And I could also see it in Mopsy if I log into that. Okay. Now back. I think that's more or less it. Some bug fixes were there and a bit more visual improvements. I made it look a bit more like the native app. I removed from here the map type. This maps, terrain, satellite view. I removed the street view component for them and also the zoom plus minus buttons. I did it because I think people are very used to this pinch zooming on the mobile devices, and because it's not available in the native one by default, it's probably kind of a recommendation from Google as well. And in the collection, if you remember, there was a bug. When viewing the collection and changing to a new route, sometimes the route would not appear on the map. You would need to play a little bit with it. I mentioned that it's a bug that Google Maps has when you move the map and display something at the same time. Sometimes, I can't predict when because some other times it works, the trajectory wouldn't appear. So it's also fixed now, and we will look shortly in the source code, and I will point out the most interesting things from what I presented now in this app. And by the way, I'm using it now instead of Mopsy because basically it goes to the same place and it's less resource intensive. So Mopsy is doing also other things like photo taking and recommendation and bus and whatever it has, and also real-time updating, talking to the server to get the route as the user is moving. But here I just send the route completely at the end, so it's less intensive on the battery, and I prefer it at the moment, which means that probably I'm going to make it better in the future if I ever have time, or if there will be a Lamad 2 course. So, it might be that I would continue this, or maybe start with something completely different. All right, now about the source code. I don't have a mouse and I don't know how to zoom in. Lucky guess, Control plus shortcut. So, it looks very similar to what you were used to. Some small additions here, like the Mopsy ID and the Mopsy name variables are shown. And the segments, if you segment the route and they are drawn in different colors, I keep them now also as a global variable so I can remove them later when the user presses something else. I didn't have time to implement that last time when I was programming it. Now here I'm removing those unnecessary map elements like this full screen, street view, the zooming, and map type control. At first I decided to actually just move the map type control from top left to top right. So this is what this code was doing, because I didn't have anything here in the top right, but then I added my statistics there, so they were overlapping, and I decided to remove them completely. But I would say that satellite view is sometimes useful also for normal people, like for normal use, more frequent use. So I was hesitating to remove it completely from there. Then this is where I'm now checking just to see if the user has logged in previously, and if so, then the name and the MOPSI ID is stored in these cookies. This you already know, it's the root segmenting function, which also draws here the different segments on the map according to the movement type. So in this function now we have also the case for the car. So here, depending on the movement type, I choose a different color for the line, and I think that last time when we did it, the colors were a little different and some of these were missing. But now I completed that also. Yeah, and this remove segmented route, this makes the segments disappear from the map. So this was, I didn't have time to do it in that lecture. And this new function here is the one that displays on the top right corner the different icons or the different movement types. So two ways of emphasizing it on that small list in the top right, and also on the map. And this statistics. So now I have statistics. I essentially calculate the speed and the distance, and to calculate the speed I take the this function already has the numbers to display, but they are floating point numbers, and I'm using these format speed and format distance functions, which are displaying it in a readable format. So they are just here on the bottom. Not really the best way to format the numbers, but I didn't want to spend too much time learning a better way to do it. So the distance, I just show meters if you have less than 1 kilometer. If you have less than 2 kilometers, I show something like 1.5 kilometers here. And if you have more, I show just 5 kilometers. Even if it has point something, I don't display it. I think this should be a change here. I don't like it very much. So I think that it shouldn't be just until, I like this formatting maybe until 10 kilometers or something more. I just recorded a trajectory using the app, and it said 3 kilometers, but I'm sure it was almost 4. So now it's showing the floor of that number, and I'm not sure how close to 4 is it really. Okay, and there is also a function for formatting the duration, which is this kind of hours, minutes, seconds, but I decided not to put it too much text, and not so important maybe, but of course it could be added there. Yeah, and then we have a function here that animates the Superman, which does that whoosh thing. So it's not very complicated. It has the root as a parameter, and an index. So it should be called with index 0 so that it starts at the beginning of the root. Now after that, this is almost a recursive function in the sense that it's calling itself, but it's increasing the index here. So then it's going to show 0.2, and then it's going to show 0.3 and 0.4 from the root until you have finished the root. So when you are at the last point, this will stop and not call itself anymore. Why I say almost a recursive function is because this is a timeout here. So this is a timeout here. And this timeout has a callback, which is another function. So this is a function without a name. I think it's called a lambda function. But basically, it's not anymore this function that is calling the same function. So it kind of looks like a recursive call, but it actually delegates to this other function to call that one after 20 milliseconds. So very quickly he moves over the trajectory. Right, and yeah, and I just put the marker at the new position. So here, every time the position changes, and I also rotate him from old position to new position, and I only do the rotation every 10th point. This is something I don't really like explaining because it's too bad solution. I'm doing it at every 10th point because if not, then if I would do it at every point, he would really fidget a lot. So he would every time the rotation changes a lot due to maybe some small GPS fluctuations or just because I have too big difference. So I only support this 45-degree rotation of the marker, and if it's going almost at 45, if it's going 27.5 degrees, then moving just a little bit is going to make it move from 0 to 45. So it's too much rotation and actually quite disturbing. So I put it less, and that's what this if statement does there. Okay. Yeah. Then this yeah. Then I have to open another file here. So this measurement file I have added here. This was the Haversine distance calculation that we made, and I added one more function, get root length, which basically just calls this get distance that you are already familiar with, but it calls between every 2 points of the root. So every successive points, so it cumulates this into the total length of the trajectory, and this was giving a number in kilometers here. So I multiply by 1,000 so that I have meters instead. I don't know why oh yes, because Mopsy was giving it in meters, and I wanted to have the same function to display the results. I wanted to make this one also be in meters, then I can call the same module without any problems. So what I mean is that the value here is coming from Mopsy server, the numbers from here, and while you're tracking, when I press the start button, those are coming from the app. And I wanted them to have exactly the same format, so that's why I did that. Right, And probably here we need to look at these controls. This has a little bit more changes, but I will focus only here, I think. So this is what happens when you want to show a different item from the collection. Yeah, so when you show a different item from the collection, some things are happening here. This G timeout, this is the timeout that animates Superman. So if you start a new, if you want to show a new route, if you are pressing very quickly, then he is already flying some other route. He hasn't finished that previous route. So I want him to stop whatever he's doing, and this clear timeout stops that timeout. It calls the animate Superman function, like I mentioned before, with the element from the collection index 0, so it starts at the first position, and I don't remember what that is. I think, oh yeah, it's the old position, so because it's the first time he is displayed, it's needed to know how to display him. I don't have yet a rotation component, no previous point, so I signal that with norm in that other function. And here, when you show to display the new route, this is the same as last time, but I'm calling it in this another timeout after 20 seconds. So this is done to fix that bug that that we had in the past. So because calling this fit bounds function and also calling this function here, where we update the points of the polyline, sometimes doesn't work. So putting this set timeout 20 milliseconds isn't noticeable by the user, at least not usually. If you're on a slow machine, then it might do it slower than 20 milliseconds, but I don't think it's a big problem. The benefit is that the rules are appearing all the time now. So that's how I fixed that one. And then I'm also showing these statistics, so what I mentioned before, and a little styling here. So the left button and the right button, when you're at the end or at the beginning, they look like disabled buttons. So after when I'm here, the right button looks a little faded. It's signaling that it's not working, but I actually didn't disable the button. I think if I press it, it's probably going to load the same route again. Yeah, so it works, but it looks like it doesn't work. So yeah, anyway, that's more or less it. Of course, there are a bit more functions that are now communicating with MOPSI. So there is this send route to server function, display whoosh. I forgot to mention it. Where was it called? Oh yeah, here after when starting Superman, I just play this sound. The sound is here in the sounds directory, and in the index HTML it needs to be defined as well somewhere. This place here. So not too difficult to do. Yeah, so I was talking about these other functions that are being called. So this send routes to server. By the way, these functions, I think they can be placed in some better files. The code could be restructured a bit better. I would group all of these functions that are getting the segmented route or talking to the server in any way in one place. Yeah, so it just formats in the format that Mopsy wants, and it makes a request to Mopsy, but actually I'm hiding it a little bit so that you can't fake it. So, how to say, I don't want to teach you exactly how Mopsy is structured in the database, because you might add routes to anybody else. I mean, it's if I teach you exactly how parts of Mopsy that are not designed to be public, not designed to be APIs, then you could give me a route that I don't have, for example. So I'm hiding it a little bit. I modified this lambda API PHP file to do the parsing in what is truly the Mopsy format. So I'm giving it some format that is close enough, but then that one is going to make necessary changes there. So it's a bit hidden there. Yeah, and get recent routes is also asking it from Mopsy, but again through this secondary function call. Yeah, I think that's all that I want to talk about. So, do you have questions about anything, like about your projects or how I will evaluate them or something like that? I have. I'm not exactly sure how to do it, but okay. So the evaluation of the projects is going to go like I specified in the web page. More or less, you need to have working projects to pass the course without exam, and then any feature will be 1 point, more or less. Now, why I say more or less is because, of course, you could have an app filled with many features, but the app might be quite buggy or sloppy somehow, or not working very well in some situations. So even if you try to make many features there, it's not necessarily going to increase the quality of the project. So I will be looking if the features actually work accordingly, and if they have severe bugs, then they might not be valued 1 point, but they might be valued a bit less. But I will reason why I give a certain grade for a certain project.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was wondering about, is there a guide for somewhere on how to implement that Mopsy login? Let's say if I want to try and add it to my project.
Well, you could copy it from here, because it's basically you could use this lambda API server calls. So,
okay.
So if you just copy from this, then you could have the login solved by Mopsy. It's actually a good idea, because I didn't think about it before, but it's the same thing that Facebook and Google are doing for the logging in of a user without necessarily creating an account for a certain service. But of course, the difference here is that it's also using the database.
Yeah, I was thinking because my project also kind of at the end creates a route of where you go. So maybe I could also store those routes in Mopsy.
Yeah, so if you copy from here, then it should be fine, and I think it's working. The only problem is I didn't make here any registration. So you should already be a Mopsy user to log in. So,
Right.
or I can make also, if you need, I can make for you specifically. So I just mean that here in the
I'll let you know because it's not currently my high priority for me, but I just thought it'd be nice to have if I find some time then.
yeah, definitely.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, so here I have the login to Mopsy, but I don't have registered to Mopsy. So if you are a new user, you would need one function like that. Yeah, okay, so a bit more about the projects. You will be graded also on the presentation. So how that will work is basically when I test your projects next week, whenever you send them to me, the sooner you send them, the sooner I can give feedback and give you an estimation of the grade. So that can happen.
When's the final deadline?
I think I'm going to have it. Let's see the.
17th.
Yeah. So this, yeah, the 17th is when you have to present, but I think that final deadline should be, I would say Wednesday, but not too late Wednesday. So the deadline will be actually 16 for submitting the projects to me because I want to also test them beforehand. Of course, I could test them later also, and the grade anyway will come a bit later after exam and also, but I think I have a better understanding of what you have done when you also give the presentation. So.
16th.
Mm-hmm. So the day before the last exercise. Yeah, and okay, so how the grading from the presentation will work, it's not going to be too much, but in situations when I'm thinking, okay, this project is worth 2 or 3, then it might make it the 3, or it might keep it the 2. So it will have an impact, but yeah, I think giving a good presentation is something that everybody should know in any situation. And this 4-minute time limit is actually more than enough for what I'm asking here. So yeah, and since we still have time, actually, maybe I look into something. Okay, so the scientific presentations course that I mentioned, this was 2015, but there was also another one last year. I took the template. Okay, it's not here. Okay, not there. Okay, I don't think I can find it, but I can switch back to this other computer and just talk during the presentation. So, I mean, So the format is you have the title. I think it's good to mention this, even though it's not course related. So you have the title of the page. Should be quite clear what you are doing there, and who is the author and date. This is in general. Now this is called a hook slide, according to this Jean-Luc's course, and this should be something that you want to attract the person to not go out when they think your presentation is boring. So to open the eyes of the audience. If you have something very interesting at the beginning, maybe a shocking result, it can be research, it can be some counterintuitive result from research, or a fact, or something that you think is like eye candy, so that it might get the users. Then this should be at the beginning of the presentation. Because then if it gets more boring, more into technical details, they still have this enthusiasm from that one slide. And this is I think it was called the description slide. Yeah, so this should say more or less everything about your method. And it's not very easy to do this if you have a research paper and you have multiple results, but it is possible to have. And finally, this is actually not what Jean-Luc is saying, but in the last one, Jean-Luc mentions put your name, visible, very visible, email, because this is if you go to conference, this is where you have the Q&A. So during the Q&A session, this slide will be up the longest. And in that time, somebody might want to write down who you are again, and he forgot from the beginning slide already. So these should be very well emphasized there, and also a brief summary of your results. So if you could have maybe a small figure, what is the best thing there that you have done, then that's fine. And you could put thank you there or something like that. But anyway, definitely recommended to go to these courses, scientific writing and scientific presentation. I think they're actually mandatory for PhD students or equivalent of those courses. They add up to 4 credits. Yeah. Anything else about the projects? I don't know, what are you worried about? I think anyway, most of them looked very, very good already in the first draft that you sent me, so I don't think we will have big problems with that. Yeah?
Is it a feature if we add for languages?
If you add?
No, languages.
Languages, of course.
Kind of language.
Of course, yeah, it's a feature. I think also Teemu added in the weather app a feature that when he types the city name, he gets recommendations from Google. So already after you type letters J and O, Joensuu appears at the bottom. So you don't have to type so much. That's also a feature, even though it's not related to the purpose of the app. It does make the usability better. So, yeah. Of course, this Superman whooshing around is not really necessary. So, it's, yeah. One more thing. When you send next time the projects, oh, right. 2 more things. Yeah, when you send next time the projects, try to add also icon for the project. So in Android, I show how you can do this. In HTML I didn't show, but what I mean by icon in HTML is it's this. This UEF logo there, or whatever else. So at least for the apps on the phone, when I install all of them, I can recognize which is which by that. Now I have maybe 4 cafeterias, 6 weather apps, and they all look the same with this Android logo. So I have to start every one of them if I want to evaluate one to find which one it is. And I would say focus more on polishing the project. So even few features, if they are implemented well, I would say it's better than many features that work poorly. So work on what you know how to do and try to have them working. And the grading, if you go to exam, also is going to be easy to get 1 or 2 grades from the exam, I think. I don't know, but to get 5, probably not so easy. I think we can end sooner today. That's why I didn't break. I'm not feeling great, and I don't want to go. Oh, okay. Yeah, one more thing. Sorry, it's very hard to concentrate now. I have to do this again.
Do we have exercises in Friday? Or-
Yes. No.
No.
Thursday.
Yes, but no.
Thursday next week is the exercises and the project presentations.
Okay.
Exercises, don't worry about them. I think it doesn't take you more than 2 minutes.
So we don't have any lectures in 11th?
11th? No. We have tomorrow exercises. Here in Kuopio.
Oh.
Tomorrow,
Okay.
8 o'clock actually. I thought it was 10. I hope I'm awake.
Okay.
So tomorrow exercises, and next week there will be some exercise for this, but I will publish it on Monday, and don't worry about that. So it's only going to be about the project presentations here, nothing else to solve. Right. I still wanted to show one thing. Yeah, okay. In Android, oh yeah, damn, so many things. I can't. First of all, okay, this page is not updated for why? Maybe the cache. Yeah. So this one, I consider it final. I'm not going to update it anymore, but I discontinued the native app. So native app is, as you know it from last time, I didn't have time. So I didn't have time to get it to the same level as the HTML5 app. And the HTML5 app, test it on your Android by installing this APK from here, if you want to test it, because it's going to be much better than simply opening the browser and going to the web page of the project. For instance, if the screen closes, like if the screen shuts down in your app, the web page, according on how your browser works on your phone, the web page is not going to function. So your root points will only appear if you're constantly timing the map to keep it open, or doing some kind of gesture to keep it open. So this is a problem there. But in the web view component from this, so again, this was the browser-based app that loads a web page there. In that there is not that problem. And also, I think Matthew pointed out, last time. This in the manifest file, adding this line here makes the code, makes the app not restart when you change orientation. So this was a big problem, actually, and I didn't really realize what Matthew was talking about fully, but yeah, this onCreate function was called multiple times. So basically, if you're tracking and you have, I tracked from Kuopio to Joensuu last week, and in Tuusniemi I decided to switch to see how it looks like in the horizontal layout, and all the points disappeared. So app restarted completely, basically reloaded the web page in the web view component. So yeah, adding this, especially this one, makes it not restart when the orientation changes. So yeah, when you load the app, load it, install it. So basically this APK is here. Of course, that only works on Android, and the web page should work on anything. So you would need to make iPhone or Windows or whatever similar web view component app, and then you can say that you are having partially native application. So it's better than just having a web page. It's actually an app on your phone, and with those tricks that we added, except for this rotation of the marker, which I don't like very much, it looks quite much like the native app that we were building before. Also, those tricks to make those bugs disappear from Google Maps help a little bit. So I would say that they are comparable at the moment. Of course, the native one is discontinued, so I can't compare everything, but the main functionality is there. Also in that one, it doesn't have the login and these other things. All right. Yeah, so an emulator, it looks like this. I made some user Lammat 2018 to test, and I don't know if it has anything in the collection, but it has a bug. Okay, it seems like the root didn't appear here. Again, that Google Maps related. I might have to put 30 milliseconds instead of 20 milliseconds there. So anyway, it's not a major issue if you know about the problem, I think. And after you install both of them, they should look like this. So there are two of them. So the one with the browser component is this one. He still has the S on the chest. If anybody asks and wants to sue me, you can tell them that it's not an S, it's a 5 from HTML5. I don't think I'm allowed to put Superman on a commercial app as it is. This here is N for native. I mean, of course, if I would remove that S from there, it would be allowed. But I think it's too much resemblance, and you would need to pay some money to the owner of DC Comics or whatever to be able to use it there. So, but as far as I know, only me and you guys might use it, so it's not that critical for me to obey that law. Yeah, and that's it.